I thought the static was just a glitch until a pair of eyes stared out at me from the screen. It was a quiet weekend at my off-campus apartment. My 2 roommates had gone home for a family event, and for once, I had the place to myself. No sound, just pure, white static. I figured the remote had gotten pressed under a cushion or something. I turned it off, didn't think much of it. I was brushing my teeth when I heard the familiar hiss of static from the living room. I walked out, half annoyed, half curious. I was looking forward to the silence, no loud music, no arguments over dishes, just peace. I stocked the fridge, locked the door, and settled in for a weekend of bad takeout and worse horror movies. Every time I started drifting off, I imagined the soft crackle of the TV turning itself back on. Eventually, I left the door to my bedroom open just in case. The first weird thing happened Friday night. Around 1 a.m., just as I was dozing off on the couch, the TV snapped back on by itself. Still just static. I stood there for a second, watching it, and I'll admit, something about it felt off. Not just weird wrong, like the static wasn't random. Like it was forming shapes, flickers of shadows and motion just beneath the noise. The next night, it happened again. This time I'd made sure to put the remote on the coffee table. The screen was glowing faintly in the dark, casting light across the floor and walls. The apartment was cold, naturally cold, like the air had been sucked out of it. I could hear the low crackle before I even turned the corner. Told myself it was probably just a power surge or interference. But by Sunday night, I was on edge. I didn't even turn the TV on all day. I turned it off again. The static shifted and cleared slightly. Just for a moment, enough to make my stomach drop. That night, I had trouble sleeping. The next day was uneventful. I tried not to let it bother me. It didn't matter. The room behind it was clearly my living room, same layout, same furniture, even the same coffee mug I'd left on the table. Around 2:30 a.m. I woke up in the dark to a soft glow coming from the living room. I didn't want to get up. The couch was empty, the mug was there, the remote untouched. I just laid there staring at the ceiling, hoping it would turn off by itself. But it didn't. I didn't tell him everything, just said the apartment creeped me out when I was alone. He laughed it off. The light kept flickering. Eventually, I forced myself out of bed and walked quietly down the hall. The TV was on, static again. But something was different. There was movement in the screen. That one of my roommates had come back early, that it was all a joke, but I know I locked the door. And they both sent me videos from hours away that same morning. I stood frozen just outside the living room, peeking in. There was a figure on the screen, sitting on my couch, in the exact spot where I'd been the night before. The outline was blurry, but it was there, dark, hunched still. But no one was there. The couch was empty. I flicked the lights on in a panic. The screen instantly cut to black silence. The living room was exactly as I'd left it. I didn't sleep that night. Monday morning, I packed a bag and stayed at a friend's dorm. When I came back the next afternoon, everything seemed normal again, until I found the note. It was sitting on the coffee table, right where the mug had been. No handwriting, just printed text, like it came from an old typewriter. Thank you for watching. Now it's my turn. I stared at it for a long time, trying to convince myself it was a prank. I haven't used the TV since. It still sits there in the living room unplugged. But sometimes, in the middle of the night, I swear I can still hear it. A faint hiss, like it's waiting.
When we moved into the new house, everything felt perfect. It was a quiet neighborhood. The house was old but charming, with creaky wooden floors and large windows that let in the light. There were 2 bedrooms, one for me and my husband, and one for our 6-year-old son, Ethan. On the first day, while we unpacked boxes, Ethan stood in the hallway, staring at a blank wall. He pointed at it and said, "That's where the window goes." We laughed. "There's no window there, buddy," I said. But he kept staring. That night, as we tucked him in, he said something strange. "The girl in the wall watches me sleep." We thought he was just being silly. New house, new dreams, kids, imagine things. Right. By the next morning, I noticed something I hadn't seen before. A small outlined fence and square on the wall he had pointed to, like something had once been there, like a window had been sealed up. Old houses have strange repairs. Ethan kept talking about it. I brushed it off. He said the girl had long hair. Her face was pale. She never blinked. I asked him where she came from. He whispered, "She's always been there." That night, I couldn't sleep. Around 2 a.m., I passed Ethan's room to check on him, and I stopped. He was sitting up in bed, facing the wall, smiling, whispering. I opened the door and asked, "Ether, what are you doing?" He looked at me and said, "I'm telling her about you." I felt a chill down my spine. The next day, I went into town and asked about the house. The woman at the local shop frowned when I gave the address. She said the house had been empty for years. No one stayed long. When I asked why, she hesitated. Then she said, "Long ago, Paldi, they never found a body. Just her room. A girl disappeared there." I asked, "What room?" She said, "The one with the missing window." I didn't want to believe it, but when I got home, I looked at the blueprints, and there it was. 3 windows on the side of the house, by only 2 from the outside. Something had been covered up. I decided to check for myself. That night, after Ethan fell asleep, I went into his room. I knocked on the wall. It sounded hollow. I pressed against it. Dark, windowed space, just big enough for someone to hide. Bah! And felt a draft. The wall wasn't solid. I grabbed a flashlight and a small hammer. I tapped at the edges of the outline. Was a hidden space. The plaster cracked behind it. A small doll, covered in dust. And there was a mattress, moldy, stained, rotten, uncarved into the wood beside it. I see. I turned around and ran. But before I reached the door, I heard something put from inside the wall, knocking, slow, steady, from the other side, and a voice. You shouldn't have opened it. I covered the hole, grabbed Ethan, and left that house for good. We moved far away. We don't talk about it. But Ethan still draws pictures of her, Kfa, the girl with long hair, and a 3rd window behind her. Please be known. Something was wrong when the substitute teacher called us by name. Sweetie never told her. But it was until after school that we discovered the truth. She was unsupposed to be there at all. But when Mrs. Calloway called in sick, none of us expected an actual lesson. Then she walked in. The last day of school at Ridgewood Middle was always care-signing yearbooks, eating junk food, counting down the minutes until summer. Miss Valesky. Her smile was too wide, her eyes too still. The room got quieter than it ever had for any real teacher. Tall, with dark hair, pulled tight into a bun, wearing an outdated navy blue dress that looked like it belonged in an old teacher's yearbook photo. "Good morning, class," she said, her voice oddly hollow, like it was coming from far away. "Let's begin." Instead, she pointed at each of us, one by one, and said our names. Not just our first names, full names, middle names, even nicknames only our parents used. She didn't take attendance. "Jessica Marie Holloway. You prefer Jess, though, don't you? Daniel Thomas Wu. Danny to your friends." She talked about it like she'd been there, describing the skid marks, the way the headlights shattered. Mine had a single sentence. "You'll see me again." The whole time, the classroom felt colder, like the AC was cranked up too high. My stomach dropped when she got to me. Ryan Patrick, you used to hide under your bed during thunderstorms when you were 6. No one knew that. Not even my friends. The lesson was on local history, something about a car accident on the old highway 10 years ago. At lunch, we compared notes. She smelled weird, Jess whispered. Like old perfume. And something else. I saw her reflection in the window, Danny said. It wasn't moving when she was... When the final bell rang, Ms. Valesky stood by the door, handing each of us a folded slip of paper. I threw it away. That night, curiosity got the better of me. I Googled her name, plus Ridgewood. The article loaded slowly. Black and white photo of a woman's samban. Same dress. Local teacher Marianne Valesky, 42. Killed in head-on collision on Route 17, 2009. The accident happened on the last day of school. My phone buzzed. A text from Jess. Did you see this? Attached was a scanned yearbook Pagda, 2009 faculty photo. And there, in the back row, was Ms. Valesky. Except in this photo, her face was blurred. Just like the face in the class picture we'd taken that morning. I rented an old countryside house to finish my art project. It was quiet, far from the city, and perfect for painting in peace. The owner was an older man who barely spoke. He handed me the key and said only one thing: "Don't move the painting in the living room." I laughed a little. "Why?" I asked. He just looked at me and said, "It belongs to the house." That should have been my first warning. When I walked into the house, I saw the painting right away. It was large, almost as big as the wall. A portrait of a woman in an old dress. Pale face. Dark eyes. She didn't smile. She just stared right at you, no matter where you stood. Creepy. But I left it alone. That night, after setting up my tools, I sat in the living room with a cup of tea. The painting was still there. The woman still staring. Something felt different. Her eyes, I could swear. They were looking more to the left than before. I laughed it off. "It's just my imagination," I said. The next morning, I passed the painting again and stopped. The shadows behind her were darker. The background had changed. Now, there was something that looked like a hallway. A small, dark hallway behind her shoulder. I stared at it for a while, trying to remember if it was there yesterday. I wasn't sure. Later that night, I took a photo of the painting, just to compare it in the morning. When I woke up, I looked at the painting again. The hallway in the background was longer now, deeper, almost like it led somewhere. I checked the photo on my phone. In the photo, no hallway, only the original background, blank and flat. The painting had changed, but only in real life. I started feeling uneasy. I began to avoid the living room, but the painting was always there, watching, changing. I walked past the room and saw the painting again. One night, I couldn't sleep. I walked past the room and saw the painting again. Now, there was something else in the hallway. A figure, faint, tall, standing far in the distance. I turned on all the lights. I stared at, painting for hours, but I could feel it watching me. I tried to take the painting down. The figure never moved. Pick the next day, but it wouldn't budge. The frame felt stuck glued to the wall. I tried cutting the canvas with a knife. The blade snapped in half. I woke up to a sound. I gave up. I decided I would just leave. But before I could pack, I saw the painting again. The figure was closer now, halfway down the hallway. I didn't sleep that night, but I could still see her, the woman in the painting. Et 3A dragon, like something heavy, was moving across the floor. B. I walked slowly toward the living room. The lights were off. Her face had changed. I didn't even look. I ran out of that house, barefoot in the cold. She was smiling, and behind her, but from behind me, I saw a photo online. Never asked for the key. The figure was gone. That's when I heard it, breathing, not from the painting. I ran. I never went back. The owner never called. But last week, a real estate listing. It was the same house, same painting, only now there were two people in the background, the woman and someone else, someone who looks like me. Do you believe that some buildings remember pain, not just through old walls or creaky floors, but through something deeper, like memory burned into the air itself? This story is about Leo, a young janitor who had just gotten a new job at an old hospital on the outskirts of town. The hospital wasn't used for patients anymore. It had been shut down 10 years ago after a fire in one of the wings, but the city kept it open as a storage facility, full of unused beds, old machines, sealed records, things no one had touched in years. Leo's job was simple: clean one floor each night, take pictures as proof, and make sure nothing was leaking or broken. He took the night shift because it paid better, and because he thought nothing could happen in an empty building. The first few nights were fine. Dusty, boring, but fine. He'd sweep through hallways, mop some corners, and listen to music on his headphones. Then came Wednesday. Leo was assigned the 3rd floor, a part of the hospital that had been sealed since the fire. When he got off the elevator, the hallway felt ... different, colder. The lights overhead flickered slightly, but only on that floor. Still, he told himself, not to be dramatic. It's just an old building, right? He started cleaning room by room. Most were empty old beds, rusted sinks, broken tile. But when he reached room 304, he paused. The door was slightly open. He checked his clipboard. That room wasn't listed. In fact, none of the rooms on that wing were supposed to be open. Curious. Leo pushed the door gently. Inside was a single hospital bed, completely made. Sheets tucked in neatly. Purr. A chair sat in the corner, like someone had been visiting recently. And on the bedside table was a cup of water, fresh. He felt a chill run through him. No one was supposed to be there. Then he heard it, the sound of soft breathing. He turned around. Nothing. The hallway was empty. He walked out quickly, trying to convince himself the sound came from a vent, or maybe the building settling. But it didn't stop. As he walked down the hall, it felt like someone was following just behind him, not with footsteps, but with presence. That feeling when someone's eyes are on you. When he reached the elevator, the doors were already open. He stepped inside, hit the button for the lobby, and just before the doors closed, he swore he saw something move down the hallway. A pale figure, standing just outside room 304, watching. He didn't sleep that day. The next night, his boss called. They'd gotten a complaint. A nurse who used to work at the hospital years ago had passed by and saw lights on the 3rd floor. Said she saw someone standing at the window of room 304, but the security camera showed no one there. Only Leo. The nurse insisted that room 304 had been closed permanently after the fire. It was where the first victim had died, a young girl who was forgotten during evacuation. She had been sedated, unable to move, trapped in her bed as the smoke filled the halls. They never found her body. Leo never went back to the 3rd floor, but sometimes when he's cleaning the lower levels, he hears the elevator moving on its own, stopping at the 3rd floor, opening, waiting, and once, just once, he heard breathing again, not from the vents, but directly behind him. So, if you ever find yourself alone in an old hospital, and you pass by room 300, don't go inside, and whatever you do, don't listen too closely, because some rooms are still occupied. I moved into my new apartment 3 months ago. It was old, quiet, and a little dusty, but the rent was cheap, and I liked the feeling of being alone. At least I thought I was alone. The first time I heard the sounds, it was late at night. I was lying in bed, half asleep, when I heard footsteps soft and slow coming from the apartment next door. At first, I didn't think much of it. Maybe I had a neighbor. Maybe they just walked around at night. But the next morning, I asked the landlord about it. He looked at me and said, "That unit is empty. Has been for years." I laughed, thinking maybe he was wrong, but he wasn't. The noises continued. Every night, around 2 or 3 in the morning, I would hear soft footsteps. Sometimes I heard breathing, sometimes whispers. I pressed my ear against the wall, and I heard something, a voice, muttering, low and shaky, like someone was talking to themselves. I couldn't understand the words, but the tone. It felt wrong. It felt cold. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe old pipes. Maybe rats. But rats don't whisper your name. Yes, one night I clearly heard it. A whisper right behind the wall. It said Anna ... my name. My heart was racing. I couldn't sleep for the rest of the night. It said my name. I jumped out of bed and turned on all the light. The next day, I called the landlord again and demanded he check the unit next door. He sighed, like he'd heard this before. He agreed to come by. He opened the door to the next apartment. It was dusty, dark, cold, empty. We walked around, looking for anything strange. Nothing. But then I noticed something. A vent. A small wall vent, facing my bedroom. But it looked like something had been pushed through it. It was old, rusty, and covered in black dust. Something soft. The landlord shrugged. Might be animals, he said. But that night I couldn't shake the feeling. Something was wrong with that wall. So I did something stupid. I pulled my bed away from the wall. I placed a chair, climbed up, and put my ear to the vent. At first, there was silence. Then, breathing. Slow, heavy. Right on the other side. I froze. And then, a voice. Clear. This time. It said, "You shouldn't have come here." I fell back off the chair. I grabbed my keys and ran out. I didn't care about my things. I didn't care about the rent. I left that apartment and never went back. A few weeks later, I found a new place. Far away. I tried to forget what happened. But sometimes, late at night, when I close my eyes, I still hear the voice, and it still knows my name.
I thought I was seeing things until the shadow behind my reflection started moving. Even though I hadn't, it was just after 11 p.m. on a Thursday night. My parents were out of town visiting my aunt, and I'd opted to stay home alone. The living room was dark except for the faint bluish glow from the paused movie on the TV screen. I turned my head to look directly at the living room behind me. Empty, of course. Just the couch, coffee table, and the flickering TV. As I walked past a large decorative mirror mounted on the wall across from the TV, something made me pause. I was 16, old enough, I thought, to handle a couple of quiet nights by myself. The first day had been uneventful. A shape darker than the room around it, tall, narrow, and still. I did homework, ordered takeout, and spent most of the evening on the couch watching old horror movies with the lights off. The way I liked it. A trick of the light. My own shape distorted somehow. Maybe a piece of furniture casting a weird reflection. That night I went to the kitchen to grab a soda. At first I couldn't tell what it was, maybe a flicker or a shape. But when I looked back into the mirror, I saw a figure. It was subtle, shadow-like, but definitely there. Standing just behind my reflection, off to the left. I froze. No ticking from the wall clock. No faint creaks from the old wood floors. Just a complete, almost suffocating silence. I didn't breathe. I didn't blink. My brain scrambled to rationalize it. But nothing behind me matched what I saw in the mirror. I turned around again. Slowly the room was empty. "Get a grip," I muttered, grabbing my soda and heading upstairs. I avoided looking at the mirror again. Just a trick of the eyes, I told myself. Shadows playing games, like fingernails against glass. And quiet. Too quiet. No humming from the fridge. My phone was on the nightstand, but the battery had died. Of course I waited, hoping I'd imagined it. I swallowed hard, forcing a laugh out of my throat. But something was off that night. I could feel it, like the air in the house was heavier somehow. The upstairs hallway, usually warm, felt several degrees colder. My skin prickled. The tapping had stopped, but the silence was worse. Still, I climbed into bed and tried to distract myself with YouTube videos. Eventually, I must have drifted off. I woke up at exactly 3:08 a.m., the cold cup of soda I'd left on the table. No noise had woken me. No dream. I just opened my eyes. The house was dead silent again. I sat up and listened. Nothing. Then I heard something. Tap, 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 soft, distant. I took a shaky step forward, eyes locked on the mirror. I raised one hand slowly, standing directly behind my reflection's shoulder. Unmoving. No features. Just a black man-shaped silhouette that shouldn't have been there. He was coming from downstairs. I sat there in bed, heart pounding. Then it came again. Tap, tap, this time. Slower, almost deliberate. Against every instinct I had, I got out of bed. Maybe it was a branch against a window. Maybe something had fallen. Maybe it was nothing. The stairs creaked beneath me as I descended barefoot, the cold wood sending sharp chills up my legs. I reached the bottom step and turned toward the living room. Everything looked normal, the couch, the TV. And then I saw the mirror. I just sat there, pressed against the wall, jumping at every creak and groan the house made. I went back downstairs nervously, cautiously, and looked into the mirror. My reflection was there, just as it should be, but I wasn't alone in it. The shadowy figure had returned, only now it was closer. "Just a bad dream," she said. "Maybe you were sleepwalking." I turned around in a panic. My chest felt tight. My reflection copied me. The figure did not, it just stood there, slightly hunched, as though waiting. My voice cracked, "Hello, nothing." I stepped to the side. My reflection followed. The figure didn't. It stayed rooted in the same spot, facing forward, slightly angled, like it was watching my reflection more than me. I don't know why I did it, maybe some stupid teenage instinct to prove I wasn't afraid, but I stepped closer to the mirror. The shadow moved, not its whole body, just the head. It tilted slightly, as if it had noticed me noticing it. I ran. I bolted back upstairs and locked my bedroom door behind me. I didn't sleep. In the morning, sunlight poured through the blinds, warm and safe. No shadow, just me, pale and tired and alone. I told my parents when they got back, and my mom laughed it off. But I hadn't been asleep when I saw it. I was awake. A week passed. I avoided the mirror, covered it with an old bedsheet eventually. I didn't care how it looked, but sometimes, even now, I'll hear it. Late at night, a soft, faint tap like fingers brushing against glass. And every so often, if I glance at the mirror just a second too long, I swear I see something move.
Have you ever stayed in a hotel so quiet it made you feel like the only person alive? This is the story of Demas, a young man traveling alone for work, and the room he should never have entered. The rain hadn't stopped since afternoon, and by the time he stepped out of the taxi, his shoes were soaked. The building was tall, grey, and lifeless. There was no music in the lobby, no one walking around, just a sleepy old man sitting behind the front desk. It was past midnight when Demas arrived at the hotel. The old man reached under the desk and pulled out a rusty old key. Room 308. He paused, as if he wanted to say something else, but instead just gave a thin smile. "Sleep well." "Welcome," the man said, without looking up. One night, Demas nodded. Yes, just one. The hallway, 2-room 308, was dim. The lights flickered every few steps, and the carpet smelled like damp cloth. He dropped his bag on the bed and walked over to the small desk by the window. When he opened one of the drawers, he found a little book, a Gessler. As he walked, Demas noticed how every door looked the same, except his, slightly scratched, with a brass number that was barely hanging on. Inside, the room was freezing. No sound came in from the street. No cars, no wind, just still, heavy silence. He flipped through it lazily, expecting meaningless scribbles, but something was odd. There were only a few names, all written neatly. All of them had checked in on the 3rd of a month. None had written a checkout date. March 3rd. Johann. April 3rd. Are you okay then? Slowly, he got up and opened it. Bye. When he turned back toward the desk, the guest log was lying open again. And this time, his name was written. Demas A. The handwriting was the same neat, perfect style as the rest. May 3rd. Reza T. June 3rd. P. Tried the phone, but no one answered at the front desk. He checked the clock. It said 6:45 a.m. It never did. The calendar on the wall still said July 3rd. The date hadn't changed. No matter how many hours passed, it was always July 3rd. No matter how tired you are, don't take the key. There was only one blank line left in the book. Maybe the log hadn't been used in a while. Maybe the others had just forgotten to fill out the rest. Still, he placed the book back in the drawer and tried to sleep. Demas froze. Today was July 3rd. He tried to shake the feeling off. It was just a weird coincidence. The air in the room felt strange, like it didn't belong. P's phone glitched whenever he tried to check the time, and then he heard it. Footsteps above him. Slow, heavy, dragging footsteps. But sleep didn't come easy. He kept waking up. But he was on the top floor. There shouldn't be anyone above. He held his breath. The steps continued, growing louder until they stopped completely. Then he heard a soft knock. Slow taps from inside the wardrobe. Pa. He stared at it. His body frozen. Nothing. Just a dusty coat hanger and an empty space. He panicked, threw his things into his bag, and ran to the door. It wouldn't open, but the sky outside was still pitch black. Time passed. He sat by the window, waiting for the sun to rise. Room 308 is still open for guests. The front desk still gives out the key. Guests still check in by. No one ever checks out. So if you ever find yourself in an old hotel and they offer you room 308, say no. Because some rooms were never meant for the living. I swear, I still hear the bells sometimes echoing down empty halls, long after midnight, when no one's supposed to be there. Beat does. It doesn't sound like a real bell anymore. Pi sounds ... wrong. It was the last day of senior year, and everything felt electric, the kind of stuff that would make her smile. We figured we'd be done in an hour, maybe two. People were signing yearbooks, hugging, crying, some just bolting out the door like the building was on fire. For me and 3 of my friends, Kyle, Jenna, and Marcus, we had a different plan. Just the 4 of us, and the distant hum of the air conditioning that never quite worked right. Marcus was messing with the Bluetooth speaker to put on music. Kyle and I strung lights around the whiteboard. We had volunteered to stay behind and decorate Mrs. Lyman's classroom. She was our English teacher, and she was retiring after 30 years. It was her idea to let us do something creative as a final farewell. We had a whole plant streamers, posters, quotes on the board, little inside jokes on sticky notes hidden around the room. When we walked back into the school around 3:45, the place was already eerily quiet. No staff, no janitor. It wasn't scary at first. Just dots still, until Jenna tried to go out and use the restroom. We got to work quickly. Jenna handled the posters. About 20 minutes in, the lights in the hallway flickered once, then went off. All of them. We tried the side exit. Even the emergency doors didn't budge. Kyle banged on one until his hand went red. The classroom lights stayed on, thankfully. But I remember Marcus pausing the music and going to the door. Was there a storm coming? He asked. Kyle pulled his phone out. Nope. Weather says clear. Figured someone just turned them off early. Maybe a janitor hitting the breaker without realizing we were still there. We didn't think much of it. ... She came back a minute later, looking pale. I think the doors are locked. We could wait for someone to notice. We were still... There maybe the custodian would come around. but even that felt flimsy. Something told me no one was coming. What, like the bathroom? I asked. No, like all the exit. It sounded warped, almost wet, like it was being wrung underwater. We all followed her down the hallway. Sure enough, the front doors were sealed. Listening, no response, no alarm. Almost dragging, just silence. I pulled out my phone, no signal. All of us checked. Same thing. No bars, no Wi-Fi. Whatever it was didn't pause. It just kept moving, and eventually the sound faded. That's when things started to feel ... off. The air was cold, not air-conditioned cold. Cold like a basement, like something forgotten. We went back to the classroom to figure out what to do, and then we heard it. The bell. It rang once sharp and metallic, echoing down the empty halls. But it wasn't the cheerful chime we were used to. Kaio suggested heading to the second-floor computer lab, maybe. The computers still had internet. We tiptoed through the dark hallway, using the faint glow of our phone screens to light the way. Marcus laughed nervously. That's weird, right? It's not supposed to ring after hour. We stood still. Our bodies just moved, sprinting up the stairs 2 steps at a time. Then came footsteps. Not a teacher's shoes, not sneakers. They were heavy, deliberate. We didn't question it, we just rushed inside and slammed it shut. Coming closer, none of us said a word. We just turned off the classroom lights and crouched behind desks, instinctively. Steps past the doorway. Slow, rhythmic. We stayed quiet for a long time. Then, Jenna whispered, "Did anyone see it?" No one had. We decided to move. That's when we saw the first locker open by itself. We heard the click, turned, and there it was, door swung wide, hanging open like a mouth. Then another. Then 3 more. One by one, down the hall, the lockers creaked open in a perfect line. We ran. I don't even remember agreeing to it. When we reached the computer lab, the door was open. The computers were off. Every single one. And when we hit the power buttons, nothing happened. Then the overhead projector flickered on by itself. A line of text appeared on the whiteboard. We hadn't typed anything. You shouldn't have stayed. We backed up toward the window. Jenna was sobbing, and Marcus was trying to kick the emergency glass. Nothing gave. Then the projector changed again. 4 pictures. Us. Taken just minutes ago. In the dark hallway. From behind, we should have heard a camera. Kyle lost it. He threw a chair at the projector and smashed it. The room went dark again, and we bolted. We didn't talk. We just ran. Downstairs. Through the gym. Past the cafeteria. We tried every door again. Still locked. Still sealed. Then suddenly we were outside. We didn't even know how. 1 second we were in the dark, and the next we were stumbling across the front lawn, blinking in the sunlight. Boom! The school loomed behind us, completely still. When we turned back to look at the front doors, they were wide open. We never got an explanation. They said we must have panicked, imagined things. Maybe made it all up. No one believed us, of course. Bye. But I've never gone back. Not for reunions. Not for anything. Sometimes I still wonder if we ever really left.
I didn't listen to the voice in my dream. Now something's waiting for me outside my bedroom door and it's not leaving. I don't usually remember my dreams, let alone hear voices in them. But this one was different. I still remember it word for word, like it was whispered directly into my ear. Do not leave the house on the 14th. That was it, just a sentence. No images, no people, just that voice.com/low. Like the kind of stillness you get right before a thunderstorm. I chalked it up to a weird nightmare, a fluke. Maybe I'd left a podcast running in my sleep or something, unnaturally clear, like it was being spoken through a speaker right next to my head. When I woke up, my heart was pounding like I'd just run a marathon. I looked around my room. Nothing felt off. Exactly. But there was this heaviness in the air. But then I had the same dream again the next night. The kind of cold that feels like it's coming from inside your bones. I couldn't shake it. All day at work, I kept looking over my shoulder. My coworkers noticed. I told them I hadn't been sleeping well, which was true. Same voice, same warning. My lights were flickering, my phone had powered itself off. I even checked the carbon monoxide detector just to be safe. Everything seemed fine, but I didn't feel fine. I told myself I'd stay inside, play it safe. Just to prove to myself it was all in my head. Just down the street to the pharmacy, 20 minutes max. I made coffee, watched TV, even started a puzzle, anything to distract myself. The moment I stepped outside, I felt it lift. That heavy pressure was gone, replaced by a strain, almost hollow silence. No cars driving past, just this muted world, like the volume had been turned down. Do not leave the house on the 14th. This time I woke up freezing, even though my heater was running. The voice was closer, louder, more urgent. As I turned the last corner toward my building, I got the sense that something was behind me. Not footsteps exactly, more like an absence, a shadow that wasn't casting light. I didn't look back. By the third night, I was actively trying not to fall asleep. I started marking my calendar, watching as the 14th crept closer. When the sun came up, the feeling finally lifted. I ran out into the hallway. Nothing was there. Nothing visible. Anyway, not the front door, my bedroom door. I kept telling myself it was just a dream. A recurring one, sure, but still just a dream. Nothing real. Nothing dangerous. My cat refuses to come inside. I hear quiet breathing from the other side of the door, some nights always at 3:12. Always the same steady rhythm, like someone patiently waiting. I lasted until about 4 a.m., and when I did finally doze off, the dream returned, but it was different now. Do not leave the house on the 14th, it won't stop if you do. I stared at the door, praying it wouldn't open. The handle twitched, just barely, not turning but like something was resting a finger on it. When I woke up, the whole apartment felt wrong. The next few days passed in a blur. Then the 14th came. It was a Saturday, cold, gray, and drizzling since dawn by noon. I was pacing. By 2 p.m. I was laughing at myself for being scared of a dream, and by 2:30 I decided to run a quick errand. As I grabbed my keys, I remember this wave of something washing over me. A pull, like gravity, but emotional, like guilt or dread. The whole walk to the pharmacy felt off. I didn't see a single person. No one walking their dogs. No kids on bikes. I kept telling myself I was imagining it. I grabbed what I needed and left quickly. I got home, locked the door, tried to shake it off. But that night, I heard it again. Not the voice in my dream, the voice in my hallway. It was 3:12 a.m. I was lying in bed, trying to convince myself everything was fine, when I heard 3 soft knocks on my door. Then came the whisper, the same voice from my dream. You let it in. I couldn't move, couldn't even breathe. I stayed that way until morning, but things have been different since. Lights in my apartment flicker no matter how many times I change the bulbs. And the worst part, I started dreaming again, but the voice doesn't warn me anymore. It laughs. The scratching used to stop when I turned on the lights until one night. It didn't. This happened when I was 12, and I still don't sleep without checking under the bed. My parents used to go on weekend trips a couple of times a year, just the two of them, leaving me home alone on Friday and Saturday nights. It was a small town, quiet neighborhood, and we had good neighbors. I was mature for my age, and they trusted me. The first time I heard the scratching, I was already in bed. It was past midnight, and I'd been reading under the covers with a flashlight. I thought it might have been my imagination at first, just a soft, slow scrape against the floorboards, a sort of dragging sound, like nails or something rough being pulled along wood. I froze. The noise was coming from directly under my bed. I held my breath and listened. It came again. Scratch, scrap, scratch. I told myself it was probably the old floorboards settling or maybe a mouse. But the sound had rhythm, intent. Too slow and steady to be random. I leaned over the edge and pulled the blanket tight under my chin, trying to peer into the darkness beneath me. Nothing, just pitch black and dust. I turned on the bedside lamp. Silence. The noise stopped immediately. Still, I couldn't bring myself to look again. That first night I barely slept. The next morning, I checked underneath. There was nothing there. Just a few old comic books and a missing sock. That should have been the end of it. But the next night, just past midnight, it started again. Scratch, scrape, scratch. Same rhythm, same place right beneath me. I just lay there with the blanket pulled over my head, heart pounding so loud I could barely hear the sound anymore. I didn't move. Then I did something dumb. I whispered, "Hello." I sat in the corner of the room with the lights on until morning. But this time I heard something else. A soft, wheezing breath. Not loud but close. I started thinking maybe it was just in my head. I was afraid they'd think I was making it up to get out of being home alone. So I kept quiet. The scratching stopped. Dead silence. After a long, horrible pause, it started again, but faster this time. Scratch, 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 scratch. I bolted up and turned on every light in the room. The sound stopped again instantly, like something exhaling just beneath my mattress. I didn't sleep that night. When my parents got home the next day, I didn't say anything. A few months passed, nothing happened. Then, in the spring, my parents took another weekend trip. I held my breath and dropped to the floor to look under the bed. The first night, everything was quiet. But on Saturday night, the scratching came back. Only this time it started before midnight. I was lying in bed, fully awake, staring at the ceiling when it began. Slower now, deliberate scrape, 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 scrape. My mouth went dry. My body locked up. I didn't look. I couldn't. But the worst part, absolute worst part, was that this time, it didn't stop when I turned on the lamp. It just kept going. Scratch. I forced myself to swing my legs over the edge, trying to be brave. There was nothing. No scratching. Just empty space. I crawled back into bed, this time leaving the lamp on. I backed into the hallway and slammed the door shut behind me. A few minutes passed, and then I heard it. Not scratching this time. A voice, a whisper. It came from right beneath me. It said my name. I jumped out of bed so fast I nearly tripped. I'm afraid this time it won't be whispering. I slept downstairs on the couch with all the lights on and the TV at full volume. I never slept in that room again while my parents were away. Eventually I told my dad. He checked for animals, inspected the vents, the floorboards. I never heard the scratching again. But I swear to you, sometimes, late at night, even years later, I'll be half asleep and hear it again, just for a second. That slow, careful scratch. Or worse, that whisper low, breathless, saying my name from somewhere too close. And when I do, I never check under the bed. Because if it's there again...
The last day of school was supposed to be a happy memory, but we realized something was wrong because none of us remembered the extra student in the back row. It was the final day of senior year, and everyone was buzzing with that giddy, restless energy that comes with summer freedom, just hours away. The photographer, tired-looking guy from the yearbook committee, kept yelling at us to stop moving. Smile. Just one more shot. We groaned, but we did it. The camera flashed, and that was it. There, in the very back row, half hidden behind Tyler Jacobs' shoulder, was a figure I didn't recognize. At first, I thought it was just some kid from another grade who'd photobombed us. But the longer I stared, the weirder it got. The sun was blazing. The air smelled like cut grass and cheap sunscreen. And the whole class was gathered on the front steps of Harrison High for the traditional last day group photo. Not like a motion blur, but like something had smeared their features just enough to make them indistinct, but not enough to hide the fact that they were there. And they were wearing our school colors. I remembered joking around with my friends, shoving each other playfully as we lined up. 2 weeks later, the photos arrived in the mail. I was flipping through mine at the kitchen table when I noticed it. Their face was blurred. The more I looked, the more wrong it felt. Blah. The figure's posture was stiff, unnatural, like they weren't quite standing right. And their hands, I swear, the fingers looked too long. No laughter, no chatter juiced. The wind hissing through the trees. And then, from behind me, I heard it. A slow, wet, clicking sound, like knuckles cracking. I tried to turn, but my body wouldn't move. The clicking got louder, closer. I texted the photo to my friends. Tyler swore he'd heard breathing over his shoulder, but when he turned, no one was there. Who's that in the back? And there, in every single one, hidden somewhere in the rows of students, was the same blurred figure, same posture, same two long fingers. The replies came fast. What the hell? I don't remember anyone standing there, dude. Was someone behind us? That's creepy as hell. No one recognized him. I went back to the original photo on my phone, zooming in. That night, I had the first dream. I was back on the school steps, but everything was too quiet. I woke up drenched in sweat. The next morning, my friend Jess called me, her voice shaking. "Did you have a weird dream last night?" Turns out she'd dreamed the same thing. So had Tyler and Marco, and at least 5 others from the photo. We started digging. Jess remembered something when we were lining up for the picture. She'd felt a cold spot behind her, like someone standing too close. Then Marco found something worse. He pulled up the school's archived yearbooks. Online, scrolling back through decades of class photos. Always in the back, always watching. The last message I got from Tyler before he stopped answering his phone was a screenshot of his own family photo. It's in my baby pictures too. I don't sleep much anymore, because now, whenever I close my eyes, I hear the clicking. And I know wherever there's a photo of me, it's in there too, watching, waiting, smiling.
I heard my son crying in his sleep, mumbling something about the man in Daddy's window. When I asked him the next morning, his answer froze me in place. He watched you while you were sleeping. We live in a quiet suburb just outside of town, the kind of neighborhood where people still wave from their driveways and forget to lock their doors. I moved here with my son Ethan after the divorce, hoping to give him some kind of stability. He's 5, bright kid, talks a lot, sometimes too much. It started one Wednesday night in early fall. I had put Ethan to bed around 8:30, same as always. He wanted his nightlight on and his door cracked open, the kind of cold that doesn't belong inside a house. I sat up, confused. The bedroom felt off. Still, I reached for my phone and checked the time. 3:17 a.m. I tucked him in, read him a dinosaur book, and kissed him goodnight. I went to my room across the hall, popped in my earbuds, and watched a few YouTube videos before eventually falling asleep. Somewhere around 3:15 a.m. I woke up to cold, not just chill. My heart started hammering, but I told myself it was the house settling, maybe the wind. That's when I noticed the sound, a faint, almost imperceptible creak, like someone shifting their weight on an old floorboard. I froze. I reached over to turn on the lamp and that's when I saw it. I walked over and shut it, double-checking the lock. I peered outside, but the yard was empty. No signs of anything. Still, I didn't sleep much the rest of the night. My bedroom window was open, only a few inches, but it had definitely been closed when I went to bed. I always lock it. Always. I stood up slowly, goosebumps crawling up my arms. The next morning at breakfast, Ethan looked tired. "You okay, buddy?" I asked, pouring milk into his cereal. Quiet feet, like someone practiced at not being heard. He nodded slowly, spooning fruity pebbles into his mouth without enthusiasm. Then, as casually as if he were telling me what he dreamed about at daycare, he said, "The house was dead silent, but Ethan's door, usually slightly ajar, was wide open. I had a scary dream last night. I was in your room. His room was dark, except for the soft orange glow of his dinosaur nightlight. That made me pause. You were in my room." He nodded again. "I was standing by the wall, and a man came in your window." My stomach turned. I forced a smile. "A man?" "Yeah, he climbed in real slow. He didn't see me, he just looked at you. He stood there for a long time. He was here again." I couldn't respond, I just stared at him. Ethan didn't seem scared, he was just telling me what he saw. Then he added, he had really quiet feet. I don't know why, but that detail disturbed me more than anything. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I chalked it up to coincidence. Maybe he heard me walking around when I got up. Maybe I thought I locked the window. I tried to let it go, but that wasn't the end. 2 nights later, I woke up again around 3 a.m., heart racing for no clear reason. I got up and stepped into the hall. He watched it 3 times, then looked at me and said, "Just a flicker, a shadow, no sound, no form, but enough to make my stomach lurch." Hours of silence, nothing out of the ordinary until 3:16 a.m. Ethan was sitting upright in bed, eyes wide, breathing fast. "Buddy," I whispered, stepping in. He looked at me but didn't say anything, just stared past me toward the corner of his room. I turned to follow his gaze. Nothing was there. "Did you have a bad dream?" I asked. He nodded. "Who?" "The man. He was behind your door." I turned toward the hallway behind me. Nothing, just shadows. I checked the house from top to bottom that night. Every window, every door. Nothing disturbed. Nothing broken. So I set up a baby monitor in my room, one of those that records video and audio, just to ease my mind. That night I didn't wake up. I slept straight through. So did Ethan the next morning. While he was watching cartoons, I checked the monitor footage on my phone. At that point, the audio picked up a faint, barely there whisper, like breathing. Something brushed past the camera. The video kept recording for hours, but nothing else happened. I showed it to a friend later that day, someone who works with security systems. "This feels like someone knew exactly where your camera was." That night, I slept with the lights on. Ethan hasn't mentioned the man again, but sometimes I catch him staring out his bedroom window like he's waiting for something. But none of it makes me feel safer, because sometimes, around 3:17 in the morning, I wake up out of nowhere, and every time my window's still shut, but I swear I can feel someone standing just outside it, waiting for me to fall back asleep. It started with a voice on the radio that wasn't supposed to be there, crackling through dispatch at 3:12 a.m., asking for Officer Daniels. Daniels had been dead for 6 years. I worked the night shift at a small-town police station in northern Ohio, one of those quiet, almost boring towns where nothing happens until it does. We had a tight crew, mostly veterans who'd been around forever. I was the newest full-timer, 2 years in, still getting used to the late hours and the eerie stillness that blankets everything around 2 a.m. That night was slow, real slow. A few patrols. Some drunk guy arguing with a vending machine. Nothing unusual. I was sitting behind the desk scrolling through paperwork when the dispatch line lit up, line 3. The call ID just said unknown number. I answered like I was county police. "What's your emergency?" There was a pause, then a woman's voice, quiet, shaky, maybe myth. The name sent a chill up my neck. "Sorry," I said, glancing instinctively toward the old memorial photo on the wall. "Officer Daniels passed away years ago. Can I help you with something?" Silence. Then she hung up. I sat there for a minute, trying to shake the weird feeling that came over me. Maybe she was confused. Maybe she meant someone else. But Daniels, that was too specific. He'd been a local legend. Died in the line of duty in 2019. He was responding to a domestic disturbance out by the lake when he went missing. They found his cruiser with the lights still on, engine running, no signs of struggle. His body was discovered 4 days later in the woods nearby. The case was never really solved. And around here, it's still a sore spot. I wrote it off as a fluke until she called again. The next night, same time. "Is Officer Daniels working tonight?" she asked, her voice nearly whispering. This time, I pressed. "Ma'am, this is the second time you've asked for him. Can I ask who this is?" She didn't respond, just whispered. "He said he'd come back." Then the line went dead. We traced the call. Standard procedure. It came from inside the station. That didn't make sense. The call was supposedly external, but the system tagged it as internal, originating from an old line in the evidence locker. And that line had been disconnected for over a year. I went down to the evidence room with one of the sergeants, keying in the access code and flipping on the overheads. It smelled like dust and freezer burn. We followed the trace to a sealed box on the second shelf, plastic wrapped and tagged, "Property of Officer M. Daniels." The box held his service weapon, badge, some personal items, and his department-issued cell phone. We hadn't powered it on since the investigation ended, but now the screen was lit. No sound, no ringing, just a faint glow through the plastic wrap. I didn't want to open it. Sergeant Miller did. The phone was warm. It had 3 missed calls, all placed from a contact labeled unknown number, but when we tapped the info, the listed number matched the station's own dispatch line. That should have been impossible. We checked the system again. Each call from the woman came in while the box was sealed, time-stamped and all. There was no way anyone had accessed the phone without triggering the inventory logs or being caught on camera. We checked those too. Nothing. The higher-ups dismissed it as a tech glitch. I wasn't convinced. The third night I stayed late alone, telling the guys I was catching up on reports. 3:11 a.m. rolled around. I stared at the dispatch board. Dead quiet. No wind outside. No calls. Then line 3 lit up. I didn't answer right away. Just watched it flash for a second. Then it stopped. A voicemail came in. I played it on speaker. The woman's voice was breathless this time. He said he would protect me. Why isn't he answering? I don't know why, but I answered aloud. Who are you? There was a pause. Then the line crackled back to life. Not through the speaker, through the radio scanner behind me. A man's voice. Low, familiar. Tell them I didn't forget. I froze. The audio file disappeared from the dispatch system 10 minutes later. Got no record of the voicemail. No trace of the call. That was the last time she called. But the next week we got a package at the front desk. No return address. Inside was an old, scratched up flip phone. When we powered it on, there was a single contact saved. Officer Daniels, and one message, unsent, still sitting in the drafts folder. He found me. Please help. I still work here. I still cover night shifts. Sometimes, around 3:12 a.m., I hear faint static on the station radio, and every so often, line 3 lights up just once, then goes dark again. I watched the body cam footage 3 times before I noticed it. Every time the rookie looked at her face, it blurred like static, as if the camera refused to see her. I work for a small-town department in northern Illinois. We're not the kind of place that sees a lot of action. Mostly noise complaints, traffic violations, the occasional domestic call. Nothing that ever prepares you for what happened to Officer Garrett. Garrett was a rookie, fresh out of the academy, quiet, eager, respectful, exactly the kind of guy you want covering your back. He was 2 months into field training when he got sent out alone for the first time. A routine domestic disturbance on the outskirts of town, just after 2 a.m. The house was a rundown farmhouse about 15 minutes from town. The 911 call came in without much detail, a woman's voice, whispering something about being afraid. The dispatcher said the connection was weak, full of static, but the address came through fine. Garrett confirmed the dispatch and headed out. It was supposed to be quick, a welfare check, maybe some drunk arguing or a couple having a bad night, but Garrett never came back. We realized something was wrong around 4 a.m. when dispatch couldn't reach him. No response on the radio, no ping on his cruiser's GPS at first. We thought it was a dead battery or a dropped signal. Then we sent officers to the house. The cruiser was parked out front, still idling. Driver's side door open. No sign of Garrett. We cleared the house from top to bottom. Empty, no woman. No signs of a struggle. The furniture looked barely touched. Dust on the kitchen counters. Upstairs room still covered in sheets like no one had lived there in months. But in the living room on the old coffee table we found Garrett's body cam just sitting there. Not damaged. Not broken. Still recording. We brought the footage back to the station. The entire department gathered in the briefing room while the chief plugged it into the system. What we saw was ... wrong. The footage started as expected. Garrett pulling up in front of the house, reading the address off his notepad. He approaches the porch, knocks once, then twice more. The door creaks open on its own. He calls out, "Hello, County Police." Someone called 911. A woman's voice answers. Faint, "I'm in here." Garrett steps inside. The place is dark, but his flashlight catches old wallpaper peeling from the walls and a layer of dust thick enough to write in. As he sweeps the light through the hallway, we see her standing at the far end, a woman in a white nightgown, barefoot, long black hair covering most of her face. She's standing perfectly still, her arms at her sides. Garrett speaks again. "Did you call us?" She doesn't answer, just turns slowly and walks into another room. He follows her reluctantly and the camera shifts as he rounds the corner. She's standing again, closer now, still not speaking. Her face is visible, because every time he looks directly at her, the image blurs. Not like poor resolution. It's like the footage refuses to resolve her face, like trying to remember a dream you're already forgetting. Garrett's voice sounds unsure now. "Can you tell me what's going on?" She finally speaks. "I'm not supposed to be here anymore." There's a pause, a long, awful silence where all you can hear is the low hum of the body cam mic and Garrett's breath. Complete darkness for about 3 seconds. When they come back on, the room is empty. No sign of the woman. Garrett spins around. "Hello." His voice cracked. The footage goes glitchy, static, flickering frames, like something's interfering with the signal. He runs back into the hallway, calling dispatch, but his radio crackles uselessly. Then he freezes. At the end of the hall where he first saw her, she's back. Only this time, she's closer. He backs away, flashlight shaking in his hand. The light catches her just enough to see her feet aren't touching the floor. He turns and bolts for the door, heavy breathing, footsteps pounding wood. The door slams shut before he reaches it. He pulls at the knob, it won't budge. Suddenly, the woman's voice, whispering right behind him. "You weren't supposed to see me." The footage cuts to static. For 5 seconds, just gray fuzz and faint audio distortion. Then it picks back up. Garrett is sitting on the floor in the living room, breathing hard. His flashlight is gone. The only light now comes from the camera's infrared mode, everything bathed in ghostly gray. He whispers into the mic. She's not a person. There's something behind him now, you can't see it, but you can hear it. Creaking floorboards, a soft, wet breathing sound. Then a laugh. It's not human, high-pitched, really like wind whistling through bone. Then Garrett's head turns toward the camera like he is looking straight through a tent. He whispers one last thing. If you're watching this, don't look at her face. The footage ends. We ran the call through dispatch records. No trace of any incoming 911 that night from that house. Not even a dropped call. The address itself had been condemned for over 3 years. Last resident, Evelyn Marsh, deceased, died in that same living room. Domestic homicide. Husband shot her, then himself. The case was closed. No survivors, no calls since. We checked Garrett's GPS. It shows he never left the driveway, but his cruiser was empty. His body never found. And his body cam, the one we found playing on the table, had no battery left. It had been dead for hours. No one's gone back to the house. And every now and then, line 2 lights up at dispatch around 2 a.m. No voice, just the sound of someone breathing. I've worked in law enforcement for over 15 years, and I still can't explain what I saw, didn't see that night. But I can tell you this. We all remember booking him. Every one of us. It was a Friday night in early November. Cold as hell outside, wind clawing at the windows like it wanted in. I was on the late shift with 2 other officers, Mendez and Parks. Things had been calm until just after midnight when we got a call about a bar fight out on Route 6. It sounded like a standard drunken nothing we hadn't dealt with before. But when we got there, the bartender was visibly shaken. Said one of the men involved wasn't like the others. He wasn't right, she kept saying. His fezzy didn't have one. We thought she was drunk or rattled. There was broken glass everywhere, a couple of bruised patrons sitting outside smoking. Looked like someone had thrown the first punch and bolt, but then we found him. He was just standing behind the bar, motionless, like he'd been waiting for us. Black hoodie jeans soaked from the knees down like he'd walked through a swamp. Even though the streets were dry, head down, didn't say a word. We cuffed him without resistance. Not a sound out of him, not even when Parks shoved him a little too hard, getting him into the back seat. That was the first time something off really hit me. His face was blurred. Not like a mask. Not like it was injured, just like my eyes couldn't focus on it. I thought maybe it was the lighting, or adrenaline, or I was just tired. We booked him under the placeholder John Doe. No ID, no phone, no prints in the system. He wouldn't give a name, wouldn't even speak. We processed him, logged everything, then put him in holding cell 3 for the night. I remember watching him on the monitors as he walked in. He sat down on the bench, hands on his knees, facing the wall. I remember Mendez joking, creepiest guy I've ever seen. Betty's just tweaking. And then we went about the rest of our shift. Nothing weird happened. No noises from the cell, no shouting, not even movement. He just sat there. The next morning, when the day shift came in, we briefed them and pulled the logs. That's when things stopped making sense. They opened cell 3 and it was empty. No bedding disturbed. No sign anyone had even been in there. At first we thought he might have been moved. Maybe a miscommunication. But there was no record. Nothing in the logs. Chain of custody ended with Parks placing him in that cell. We checked the security footage. And this is where it gets worse. The hallway cam outside the holding cell showed no one entering or exiting all night. The interior cam inside cell 3 showed nothing. Literally, just an empty room. For 8 hours straight. But I know what I saw. We all do. We booked him. I watched him walk into that cell. I watched the live feed for at least a minute after he sat down. Yet the saved footage was blank. No movement. No man. Just flickering fluorescent light over a cold, empty bench. We started questioning ourselves. Maybe we'd messed up the paperwork. Maybe someone erased the footage. Maybe he never existed. But then we found his hoodie. Still bagged. Still logged in evidence under John Doe. Only now, the inside was soaked with something that smelled like stagnant water and rusted metal. And one more thing. Parks, who had driven him in, quit that same afternoon, just walked out. Wouldn't explain. Wouldn't take calls. I saw him 2 weeks later in the parking lot. Just sitting in his truck, staring at the building. I knocked on his window. When he rolled it down, he looked hollow. He didn't have a face, Parks said. Even in the mirror, I saw him in the rear view the whole way back here. And there was nothing. We tried to file an incident report, but the higher-ups dismissed it. Technical glitch, misfiling, human error. The usual excuses, but Mendez and I, we know better. Especially because 2 nights later, the hallway camera outside cell 3 flickered on by itself at 3:03 a.m. When we played it back, there was a single frame, just one, where something stood in front of the door. Only it wasn't clear. It was just a smudge. Humanoid, pale, and featureless. I've never worked another night shift since, but cell 3, they keep it locked. Not because it's full, but because sometimes, in the middle of the night, the motion sensor light inside turns on, and there's no one there, or at least, no one you can see. I woke up to the feeling of being watched. Not paranoia, not a dream. I knew someone was there, and when I finally opened my eyes, the room was empty. I was in my bed, just like normal, except everything felt off. Not doing anything, just watching. I couldn't see his face clearly, but I remember Shadowstall, unmoving. Bad sleep, maybe stress, but the dream came back. The next night, and the one after that, like he'd been standing there for a long time. No sound, no breathing, just presence. The air was heavier, like it was thick with humidity, but my skin felt ice cold. And when I did, he'd be there. I could feel the weight of his stare on my face. Still no features, just darkness where his face should be. But I remember something, his smile. Not because I saw it, but because I felt it. I don't know how to explain it. Because when the dream stopped, the real nightmares began. I'd hear faint creaking from the hallway around 3 a.m. even though I live alone. My cat, normally lazy and indifferent, started hissing at corners of the room, backing away like something was there. I even started sleeping on the couch with the lights on. It was like he was enjoying something I didn't understand. On the other side was the man, closer than ever. I couldn't see his face, but I could see his teeth. Perfectly white. Too many of them. He grinned, as if he'd finally won. I couldn't move, just stuck there, staring at the ceiling. And then I felt him. The sky was still gray. I don't know why I got up. I don't know why I walked to the door, but I did. Like I was in the dream again. Helpless. But the dread didn't leave. It started about a month ago, with a dream. And that smile. Wide. Too wide. Like he'd been smiling his whole life and didn't know how to stop. There was a man standing in the corner of my room. I woke up gasping. Sweat soaked my back. But my room was freezing. I laughed it off at first. And every time, he got closer. I watched the camera footage over and over. But there was nothing there. No knock. No man. Just me opening the door to nothing. By the third night, he was standing beside my bed. I started losing sleep. I'd stay awake as long as I could. But no matter what, I did TV, music, lights on. I'd eventually drift off. Eventually, I stopped dreaming altogether. I couldn't move. I just stood there frozen. He didn't say a word. Just tilted his head like he was studying me. Like he recognized me. That might sound like a relief, but it wasn't. It started subtly. My front door would be unlocked in the morning, even though I triple-checked it every night. Small, partial prints, like someone had stood just inside the doorway before turning around. The police brushed it off. Maybe a maintenance worker. Maybe I left the door open. Maybe I forgot something. And then came the worst part. One morning I woke up to find muddy footprints in my apartment. But I knew it was him. I started keeping my curtains shut all the time. I bought security cameras. But the night before he showed up, I had one more dream. This time, I was in the kitchen. I was standing at the door, hand on the knob, terrified but unable to stop myself from opening it. And then I woke up to the sound of a knock, not the doorbell knock. It was 6:12 a.m. I looked through the peephole, nothing, just an empty hallway. But I opened the door anyway. And he was there, not in the hallway, right in front of me. As if he knew I'd opened the door. As if he'd been waiting. He looked exactly how he felt in the dreams, tall, thin, pale skin like paper. Black hoodie. I couldn't speak. And then, still smiling, he turned around and walked away. No rush, no fear, like he belonged there. I slammed the door and locked it 5 different ways. It's been 3 weeks. I haven't seen him since, but I don't sleep anymore. Not because I'm afraid of dreaming, but because I'm afraid I'll wake up again. And this time, he won't be smiling.
Have you ever received a phone call that didn't feel normal? A call that made you feel like someone was watching, not from outside your window, but from a time that hasn't happened yet. This is what happened to Clara. She lived alone in a small apartment just outside the city. Her days were simple. Wake up, go to work at the bookstore, come home, make tea, read a chapter or 2, then sleep. That was her routine. Safe, quiet, uneventful, until one night, her phone rang. It was 2:13 in the morning. She woke up confused. The screen just said, unknown number, no name, no details. She hesitated, ... then answered. At first, there was only static. Then she heard a whisper. Clara. She sat up in bed. Who is this? The whisper came again. You don't have much time. Then silent. The call ended. She lay there, heart racing. Maybe it was a prank. Wrong number. Or maybe she was dreaming. But the next night at exactly 2:13 a.m., her phone rang again. Same number. Same whisper. Clara, please listen. You must leave your apartment before the 7th. "It's not safe," she asked again. "Who are you?" There was no answer. Just static. Then nothing. The calls kept coming. Every night at the same time. Always the same warning. Leave before the 7th. Clara tried blocking the number. It didn't work. She changed phones. Changed SIM cards. The calls still came. She went to the police. But they said there was no record of any incoming calls. Her phone logs were empty, like nothing ever happened. By the 5th night, she started losing sleep. Her hands trembled during the day. Every time the sun set, her chest tightened, waiting for the next call. And then came the night of the 6th. The voice sounded more desperate this time, "Clara. This is my last call. They're watching me now. I won't be able to speak again. Please, don't wait. Leave now." The voice paused, then said something she still hears in her dreams. "You'll understand soon." Poof! That was it. The last call. She stared at the clock. It was 2:15 a.m. Something in her, instinct, fear, something deeper, told her to listen. She packed a small bag, grabbed her jacket, and left the apartment without even locking the door behind her. She checked into a small motel across town. It was quiet, almost too quiet. The clerk didn't ask questions when she arrived, looking pale and shaken. Clara didn't sleep that night. She just sat on the bed, staring at her phone. Bite this time, ... It didn't ring. And then, at sunrise, she turned on the news. There had been an explosion, a gas leak, in her building. It happened just after 3 a.m. The blast destroyed the upper floors. Her apartment, what used to be her home, was gone. Authorities said the leak must have started days ago. Here's the strange part. Someone had reported it 5 days before the explosion. An anonymous call, made from her own number. No one could explain how. Clara still keeps that phone. She doesn't answer calls from unknown numbers anymore. But sometimes, at night, she stares at the screen and wonders ... Who was the voice? Was it her from the future, or something else trying to help her? Whatever it was, one thing is certain. If your phone rings at 2:13 in the morning, and the voice on the other end already knows your name, don't hang up. Because sometimes the future is calling, and it's calling to save you.
We found the final log entry scrawled in frantic handwriting, dated 2 days after the crew vanished. It ended with, "There's knocking again," a cast iron relic perched on a jagged outcrop 10 miles off the coast of Maine. The 2 keepers stationed there, Brooks and Hallie, hadn't checked in for 5 days, and the radio contact was dead. It wasn't unheard of for weather to knock things out temporarily, but this long without backup systems or flares. Unacceptable. Inside it, everything was intact. Coffee mugs on the table, both beds made. A shortwave radio crackled with static, still powered. No signs of a struggle, no blood, no signs of life. But it's coming from inside the lantern room. We didn't let anyone in. The ocean was eerily calm, too calm, and the gulls that usually circled the tower were completely absent. As our boat pulled alongside the old dock, I noticed right away, the light was off. I was part of a 3-man Coast Guard team sent to investigate the sudden silence from Elbridge Point Lighthouse. We arrived just before sunset. Brooks and Holly were supposed to keep it running, storm or not. We climbed the slick steps to the lighthouse base and found the heavy metal door shut but unlocked. The air grew colder the higher we went. The last few steps creaked, even under our weight, as if protesting our presence. Just stillness. And then, the logbook. It was open on the main desk in the watchroom. Dated 3 days prior, the last official entry was normal. Routine weather updates. Minor fog warning. Nothing out of the ordinary. But several pages later, on a separate sheet of yellowed paper, someone had scribbled an entry with a pencil. The handwriting was shaky, almost unreadable in places. We heard knocking last night, thought it was wind, but it was inside. Lantern room door was shaking. We didn't open it. We didn't let anyone in. The date was 2 days after Brooks and Hallie had gone silent. We exchanged glances. That door leading up to the lantern room at the very top had a heavy twist lock from the inside. You couldn't lock it from below. My partner, Jeff, shrugged it off. Maybe one of them lost it. Wrote this before walking off the job. The only entrance was the one we were standing at. We climbed the spiraling staircase to the upper level, boots echoing on iron. Then we reached the lantern room. The door was closed. Was inside a sealed room. Something about the silence pressing down on us, the unnatural cold, made every instinct in me scream to not open that door. Told him to check the outside of the lantern room for any signs of damage, broken glass, anything. A more comprehensive team would arrive in the morning. We left the lighthouse just as night fell. The beam never came on. He circled the tower, came back with nothing. Every window intact. No breaches. I twisted the handle. Locked. From the inside. Jeff looked at me, eyebrows raised. That doesn't make sense. Try again, I said. He knocked on the door, and something knocked back. 3 hard, deliberate knocks mimicking his rhythm exactly. We stood frozen. The lantern room was unlocked. Empty. Logbook gone. No trace of the last 2 keepers was ever found. There's got to be someone in there, he whispered. But the only way to lock it was from inside. And there was no ladder down. No exit through the glass dome. Jeff looked through the narrow pane in the door. It's pitch black. The lights off. I radioed our 3rd man, Stevens, waiting below. It was jerky, hesitant, as if someone was walking in circles, carrying the beam by hand. Whoever was knocking, Jeff wanted to force the door. We stayed in that stairwell another 20 minutes. No more knocks. No voices, nothing. Eventually, Protocol 1. We radioed for further orders, and Central Command told us to secure the area and return to the mainland. We were a mile out when Stevens pointed back toward the tower. Hey, look, the lantern room light was on. A cold, white beam swept across the ocean. But no one had gone back inside. No one could have unlocked that room. And here's the thing that has haunted me since. The light wasn't T moving the way it should, hab smooth and mechanical. We've reviewed our boats on board footage later, and in one frame just before the beam turned off for good we caught a silhouette in the lantern room, not Brooks, not Hallie, not anyone we recognized. The Coast Guard searched Elbridge Point Lighthouse top to bottom the next day, but sometimes, on stormy nights, boaters report seeing the light turn on again just for a few minutes, sweeping the sea with unnatural precision. And those who get too close, they say, they hear knocking from above. The first time I heard it, I was half asleep and hungover, but there was no mistaking the sound. Somebody at the bottom of the lighthouse was screaming for help, and it was my voice. I took the job for the solitude. After a messy divorce and a worse drinking problem, the idea of being alone for weeks at a time sounded like therapy. The job was simple. Maintain the automated systems at Greystone Light, a remote beacon off the coast of Newfoundland. The place had been unmanned for over a decade, but the Coast Guard still sent people out quarterly to make sure the beacon stayed functional. The crewman who ferried me over just nodded and said, "Be careful. This place has got long shadows." That's where I came in. I was dropped off by boat, carrying a duffel bag, a sat phone, and 2 weeks' worth of food. No frills. Just a generator room at the base, storage midway, and a sleeping cot in the old keeper's quarters. At the time, I thought he meant bad footing. I would learn differently. The lighthouse itself was your classic cold steel, echoey, with 69 wrought iron steps curling up to the lantern room. The first 3 nights were uneventful. Cold wind, gulls, lots of rain, hammering the glass. The usual loneliness that creeps in around 3 a.m. I kept myself busy running system checks and reading paperbacks by flashlight. But on the 4th night I woke up to screaming. Not distant, not faint. It was coming from the base of the tower, maybe 20 feet below. The wind outside had stopped. No more rain. Just the distant crash of waves and the pounding of my pulse. It was a man's voice. "Sleep paralysis," I muttered, though I didn't believe it. I shut the door behind me and climbed back up, the iron railing cold enough to sting my fingers. "Help. Please, let me out," like I was screaming from a place of real pain. I froze in bed, heart hammering, trying to convince myself I was still dreaming. But the voice kept going, panicked, gasping. It wasn't like hearing a recording. It was raw, desperate. I grabbed my flashlight and crept down the spiral stairwell, every step groaning under my boots. When I reached the generator room, the screaming stopped. Everything was still. No one there. No equipment, malfunction, no radio playing tricks. I stood there for a full minute, my own breath fogging in front of me. Then I laughed it off. I'd wake up gasping, drenched in sweat, convinced I was still in the dream. I even recorded myself one night, just to prove I wasn't losing it, but I didn't sleep the rest of the night. And the next night it happened again. I even tried the emergency flare, but the launcher jammed. I was alone, surrounded by fog, and every single night I heard myself screaming to be let out. Same voice, same words. Help, let me out. Please, please. I'm still down here. This time it sounded closer, but when I went to bed, that's when the dreams started. Every time I closed my eyes, I was back in the tower, looking up instead of down, watching my own silhouette sprinting up the spiral staircase as something invisible chased me from below. By the 7th night, I stopped going downstairs. I tried to call the Coast Guard, but the sat phone kept giving me static, no signal. I sat in the lantern room, flashlight and crowbar in hand, watching the stairwell like something might come up from the darkness. Said he heard his own voice screaming below. Claimed he saw something watching him from the stairwell mirror. I started keeping a journal to ground myself. Wrote down every sound, every detail. I don't know why the lighthouse repeats us, copies our voices like it's just recording every moment we were inside. That was the worst mistake I made. The crewman took one look at me and didn't say a word, because the next night, as I listened to the tape, I heard it again clear as day. A third voice, not mine, not the echo. It was whispering in the background, barely audible behind the cries for help. It said, "You were already let out." I dropped the recorder. Didn't even try to sleep that night, but nothing ever did. On the 10th day, the fog lifted. The boat came. I didn't tell anyone about what I heard. Not officially. I told them the systems worked fine. Did my job. Got paid. But a week later I got curious. I looked up the tower's history. There was one maintenance report from the early 2000s, barely legible, written by a tech named Barry Colson. It was flagged as unresolved psychological distress. In it, he described hearing cries for help in the tower. Barry died in a psychiatric hospital in 2004. I don't know what he saw or what I heard, but I'll tell you what keeps me up at night. On the last night, just before the boat arrived, I stood at the top of the stairs, looking down into the dark, and I swear to God I heard a voice whisper up the spiral. It was my voice, but it wasn't screaming anymore. It was laughing. The last thing they ever found of him was the tape recorder washed up on the rocks, still running. His voice, barely above a whisper, repeated the same thing over and over again. They said the sea wants one more. I was part of the resupply team for a chain of decommissioned lighthouses off the northern Washington coast. We mostly brought fuel, rations, and occasional maintenance equipment to guys who didn't mind isolation. The kind of men who didn't ask for much, just a paycheck and silence. Just stories about radios going dead, flares not firing, people feeling watched. That kind of thing. But Caleb didn't care. He was quiet, late 20s, just out of the Navy. I remember because we were checking weather conditions and saw the visibility had dropped to nearly zero around Winthrop. Nothing unusual for the season. Said he liked fog and distance. His words, not mine. It was mid-October when we dropped a new guy, Caleb Dotterson, at the old Winthrop light. Emergency protocol. A manual activation. Winthrop had a reputation, not a haunted one. Nothing that dramatic. We unloaded the supply crate, gave him the sat phone, and left. It was supposed to be a 3-week solo stint standard for those remote runs. But he didn't last 5 days. Still tied up exactly how we'd left it. The fog had rolled in thick on the 3rd night, but then our station got a call. On the wall, scratched into the metal paneling with what looked like a screwdriver, were 6 words. It wasn't from the sat phone. It was a distress ping and automatic alert triggered from inside the lighthouse. No answer. It was cold, damp, and silent in that way. The ocean gets when it feels wrong, like the world is holding its breath. The tape was an old-style mini cassette recorded over dozens of times, so the quality was bad. But his voice was clear. We scrambled a team and left before dawn. By the time we reached Winthrop, the fog was still clinging to everything. The dock was empty. No sign of Caleb. The boat was gone. Not missing. Just never used. We approached the lighthouse. The front door was open, just a crack, creaking gently on the windless air. Inside, the generator was still running. Lights on. Coffee cup half full. Everything else looked untouched. Not yelling, not screaming, just talking. Like a conversation. But only one voice, repeating something, except the bedroom. The cot was flipped, blankets shredded like someone had clawed at them. They said the sea wants one more. We searched the entire structure, top to bottom. Lantern room, storage, the outer decks. No blood, no tracks, no Caleb, but we did find the recorder. It was wedged behind a tool chest in the main control room, still running. Then, just as the tape was about to run out, he whispered. He sounded panicked, breathing heavy. There was a long stretch of silence before he said, barely audible, no signs of a boat or anyone else arriving or leaving. No foul play. They ruled it as presumed lost at sea. It started on the second night. I heard someone outside, talking, then static. Another minute passed before he spoke again, quieter. I asked if someone was there. The voice stopped. Then it answered. It said my name. It said it had been waiting. There was a metallic clang, maybe, the door slamming. Then his voice again, sharper this time. It's in the fog, I see something. It's moving against the light, casting no shadow. I thought I was alone. I thought I was more static. They said the sea wants one more. And that was it. The Coast Guard launched an official search. Helicopters, divers, dogs, nothing. Claimed it was too costly to maintain. Locals say they still hear strange sounds near the cliffs on foggy nights, like someone talking just out of sight. Not even a footprint beyond the lighthouse. But that doesn't explain what I heard that night. You see, a few days after the search, I went back. I had to know. Curiosity. Guilt. Something. I just needed to see it again. I stayed until sundown. The fog rolled in just like before. Thick, heavy, and then I heard it muffled far below. Avoidsconversational.com. It was saying a name, not Caleb's mine. I stood there on the lighthouse stairs, flashlight trembling in my hand, while something just beyond the fog line spoke to me like it already knew I was listening. I didn't respond. I didn't move. I just backed down those stairs, step by step, until I reached the dock. I never looked back. They locked up Winthrop Light not long after, but no one goes near it anymore. And me, I quit that job 2 weeks later, because if I'm being honest, I still hear that whisper sometimes, usually late at night, usually when it's foggy, always saying the same thing. The sea wants one more. I woke up choking on my own breath, heart pounding, soaked in sweat. My hands were trembling, and for a few seconds, I genuinely believed they were covered in blood. I stared at them, expecting to see crimson streaks, but they were clean, still shaking, still cold. The clock next to my bed read 3:12 a.m. Just like last time, just like every time. And the worst part, I knew exactly what I'd see before I opened my eyes. The same dream, over and over. It started maybe a month ago. At first I thought it was just a fluke. I don't usually remember my dreams, but this one hit differently. It was vivid, too vivid. I was always standing at a gas station around midnight. It was raining lightly, and the sky had this strange, purplish glow from distant city lights reflecting off the clouds. The air was damp, the kind that gets into your hoodie and makes you feel heavier. The fluorescent lights overhead would flicker with this annoying, high-pitched buzz. I'd pull into a spot, get out, swipe my card, grab the nozzle, and start fueling up. Then I'd hear it, footsteps, soft, but distinct. I'd turn around. Nothing. I'd squint into the shadows between the pumps, and then he'd be there. A tall man, hooded, face in shadow. He wouldn't say a word, just step forward fast and stab me in the gut. Deep I'd fall, clutching the wound, gasping, and feel the cold concrete against my back as the blood spread. Then I'd wake up. I was gasping, always at 3:12 a.m., the same second, every single time. I told myself it was stress. I'd been working late shifts, barely sleeping, lots of caffeine, but the dream kept coming, every night, clearer. And what scared me wasn't just how real it felt, it was how familiar it felt. Like I wasn't dreaming something new, like I was remembering something I hadn't lived yet. I tried talking to my friend Paul about it. He's into all the psychology stuff. He told me it was likely just a manifestation of subconscious anxiety. You're priming your brain, he said. The more you expect to dream it, the more likely you are to keep dreaming it. Sounded logical, at least on the surface. But even he started looking concerned when I told him how consistent the dream was, how the details didn't change at all. And then one night something happened that I still don't have a good explanation for. I was driving home Ladigan and I realized I needed gas. I wasn't thinking much about it, just trying to get home. So I pulled off the main road onto this side street I didn't recognize. There was a gas station there, one I had never seen before. But the second I pulled into the lot, my stomach flipped. The rain started drizzling. The light over pump 3 flickered, just like in the dream. The same iced machine sat crooked near the door, humming faintly. I didn't even put the car in park. I slammed it into reverse and peeled out of there. When I got home, I couldn't sleep. I sat on the couch in the dark, convinced that something was following me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his silhouette. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had just escaped something, or maybe just delayed it. I became obsessed with tracking the dream. I wrote everything down in a notebook. The color of the sky, the exact time on the pump, the smell in the air like wet pavement and faint gasoline. Every detail was always the same. But then I noticed something else. The man's face. It had always been hidden in shadow. But slowly, over the next few nights, the dream changed. Not the setting or the avenged us. The face, it started becoming clearer. First, just a jawline. Then eyes, familiar features. Until one night I woke up screaming because I saw it fully. It was me. The man who stabbed me looked exactly like me. I couldn't eat, I barely slept. I started calling in sick to work. I disconnected my doorbell camera. I kept all the lights on at night. I stopped looking at mirrors. And still, the dream came back. Then, last Friday night it happened. I was driving back from my sister's house. I'd lost track of time. My phone battery had died. It was nearly midnight, and my gas light blinked on. The nearest station was 5 miles away. I didn't think I just pulled off the next exit and turned into the first station I saw. And there it was, the gas station. Everything about it was identical to the dream. The light, the rain, the flickering sign. My heart dropped into my stomach. I nearly threw the car into reverse again, but something stopped me. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe something darker. I don't know. But I told myself, if you just don't get out of the car, you'll be fine. I sat there watching the pump, watching the shadows. The rain tapped on the windshield like fingers. 5 minutes passed, nothing. 10, still nothing. And then I started to feel stupid. It's just a dream, I whispered. It can't control you. So I opened the door. I stepped out. The cold hit me like a slap. I pulled up my hoodie, walked to the pump, swiped my card, grabbed a nozzle. Footsteps, I froze. Not imaginary ones, not in my head. Real, wet footsteps on pavement. I spun around. Empty. The lot was still. Then I turned back to the pump and saw a reflection in my car window. Standing behind me. Not walking, not breathing. Just standing there. Same hoodie, same face. Mine. I turned again. And nothing was there. But then pain exploded in my stomach, white hot and deep. I dropped to my knees. My hands went to the wound instinctively. Wet. Warm. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't scream. The world tilted. I fell to my side. The pavement was cold. The blood spread fast. I remember the lights flickering above me. The sound of rain on my skin. I remember gasping, knowing this was exactly how the dream ended. But I didn't die. Someone found me. Apparently an anonymous 911 call came in. They found me barely conscious. I don't remember the ambulance. I woke up in a hospital room, bandaged up, stable, alive. The cops were confused. No sign of the attacker. No fingerprints. Surveillance footage was corrupted. The camera above the pump glitched out during the exact 3-minute window I was stabbed. When it came back online, I was already on the ground. Alone, they said it might have been a mugging, a drifter, someone on something. But I know what I saw. I know who stabbed me. It was me. And now, I'm starting to dream again. Not about the gas station. Now I dream of my bedroom. Of standing beside my own bed, watching myself sleep, holding something in my hand. And every time I wake up, I find the closet door open just a little more than the night before. She looked me straight in the eye and said, "You came back, just like you promised." I'd never seen it before in my life. It happened last fall, during a weekend trip with my girlfriend. Emily, we were driving through upstate New York. The kind of road trip people take when they want to disconnect from the noise. I didn't even want to go at first. I had work piling up, deadlines, stress, but she insisted, and I caved. We booked a small Airbnb in a quiet rural town called Elbridge, population, maybe 1,000. The kind of place with one diner, no street lights, and roads that go quiet after 7 p.m. On our second day there, we were driving back from a hiking trail when Emily spotted this old antique store off the main road. It looked like it had been there forever. Weathered shingles, crooked windows, and one of those rusted wind chimes made of spoons hanging near the door. I could barely read the sign above it, but she was already getting out of the car. I followed more out of boredom than interest. The inside was like walking into someone's memory. Faded photos, dusty furniture, porcelain dolls, missing eyes, shelves packed with cracked teacups and clocks that didn't tick. The air smelled like old wood and something slightly sweet, like vanilla left too long in a jar. Emily was drawn to some vintage jewelry cabinet, but I wandered toward the back, where the lighting was dimmer and the shelves tighter. And that's when I saw her. An elderly woman, maybe in her 70s, with long gray hair and a braid and thin, wiry glasses perched on her nose. She stepped out from behind one of the shelves, like she had been waiting for me, and then she just smiled. "You're earlier this time," she said. I blinked, confused. "Sorry." She tilted her head. "Last time it took you until spring to find me again. But I suppose that was before your accident." I laughed awkwardly, thinking maybe she mistook me for someone else. "I think you have me confused with someone, Shane," she said, cutting me off. "That's my name." I didn't have a name tag. I hadn't told her. I froze. How did you know my name? She stepped closer, slowly, like she didn't want to spook me. Her eyes were cloudy, but sharp at the same time, like she was looking through me and into something else. You told me, she said, when you were still James. My blood ran cold. James was my grandfather's name. I'd never told anyone this, not Emily, not even my parents, but when I was little. I used to have these dreams where I was in someone else's body. A man's body. I'd wake up smelling pipe smoke. I'd look in the mirror and see an older face with deep lines around the mouth. In those dreams, I always felt this intense sorrow, regret, and one word repeated over and over in my head, Elbridge. I never made the connection until that moment. I backed up, bumping into a shelf behind me. Okay, seriously, what is this? She sighed, not in frustration, but like someone who'd waited a long time to be believed. You said you'd return. You said you had to make it right. I don't even know you. She looked at me with something like pity. You do. Not as Shane, but once in another life. You came here in 1961. He left something behind. At that point, I didn't know whether to be terrified or fascinated. I looked around for Emily, but she was still at the front, completely unaware. I turned back to the woman. What did I leave behind? She walked to a nearby cabinet, opened it, and took out a small, carved wooden box. She handed it to me like it was something sacred. You said you were hiding it from someone, that they couldn't know. I opened the box. Inside was a silver locket. It looked simple from the outside, but when I opened it, there was a tiny photograph of a woman I didn't recognize in a slip of folded yellow paper. I unfolded the paper. It read, "Forgive me. I chose the easy path." The handwriting was shaky, but something about it felt familiar. I don't remember the rest of the conversation. I know I left the shop shaken, clutching the box, not even telling Emily the full story. She asked why I looked like I'd seen a ghost. I told her I wasn't sure. I hadn't. That night I dreamed again, but it wasn't the usual haze. It was sharper. I saw a man, tall, suit jacket, hair slicked back, arguing with someone in a candlelit room. There was fear in his voice, guilt. And then I saw the old woman, younger, crying, clutching the same silver locket. He said he'd return, he promised. I woke up crying, with my hands gripping the bedsheet so hard my knuckles turned white. The next morning I told Emily we needed to leave early. I made up a work emergency. I didn't tell her about the dream, or the fact that, for the first time in my life, I felt like someone was waiting for me to finish something I'd started decades before I was born. 2 weeks after we got back home, I tried calling the antique shop. The number one found online was disconnected. I even tried sending a letter to the listed address. It came back unopened, no such recipient. A month after that, I drove back to Elb. The antique store was gone. Not closed, gone. The building was boarded up. Looked like it hadn't been used in years. The sign was gone, the windows shattered. When I asked the guy at the local diner about it, he frowned and said, "You mean the old Mercer shop? That place closed down in the 80s after the owner died in a fire." When I asked for a picture, he pointed to a bulletin board with old photos of the town. And there she was, younger, but clearly her, the woman who knew my name, the woman who remembered me, from a life I don't remember living. Now, sometimes, when I walk past certain windows or mirrors at night, I catch a glimpse of someone behind me, a different face, older, sadder, watching, waiting for me to remember the rest. I hadn't heard his voice in almost 20 years until it showed up on my phone last Tuesday, whispering words he never got the chance to say. My older brother Marg died in a car crash in 2004. I was 15. He was 19 and heading home from his college orientation. That was it. Closed casket, shattered family, the whole aftermath, a blur. I don't remember much about the funeral, just that my mom collapsed when they played his favorite song. Since then, we kept his room almost untouched. My parents moved out years later, but I still visit that house. It's where I grew up. It's where I feel closest to him. Last week, I was staying at the old place alone. My wife was visiting her sister, and I figured I'd spend a quiet weekend there, going through some of the boxes in the attic that my mom asked me to sort. On the second night, around 1:30 a.m., I was watching a movie on the couch when I got a phone call. I never answered those, but something compelled me to press accept. There was no one on the line at first, just static. Then, about 4 seconds in, I heard someone breathing, soft, uneven, like they were trying not to cry. And then, a whisper, "I don't think I'm gonna make it back. Tell Mom I'm sorry." I froze, because the voice, it sounded like Mark. Not just kind of like him, exactly like him. Then the line cut out. I stared at my phone for probably a full minute before I could even move. I replayed the voicemail 3 times. Every time, it sounded more and more like him. The same tone, the same inflection, even the way he said Mom, like he always did when he was guilty about something. But here's the thing. The voicemail didn't show up in my normal inbox. It wasn't listed under recent calls. It was buried in a separate, unnamed folder I didn't even know my phone had. I only found it by accident, tapping through the settings. It didn't have a just the word, unknown origin. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat in Mark's old room, surrounded by dusty posters and fading Polaroids, holding my phone like it might start talking again. The next morning, I did something I probably shouldn't have. I took the voicemail and ran it through some online audio matching software, something basic, nothing fancy, just to compare it to a video I had of Mark from 2003. The match came back at 97% certainty. I didn't know what to do with that. I didn't tell my wife. I didn't tell my parents. Later that day, I started going through the attic. I found one of Mark's old backpacks stuffed into the back of a shelf. Inside were papers, burned CDs, and a small spiral notebook. Most of it was typical college prep stuff. But in the middle of the notebook was a page with a single sentence. If I don't make it back, check the station. No explanation. No data stat. There was only one thing the station could mean: an old train station about 15 minutes outside town. It had been closed since the late 90s. We used to go there as kids, exploring the abandoned tracks, throwing rocks, pretending we were spies. It was our spot. I hadn't been there in years. But that night, I drove out, parked just past the rusted gate, and walked up the overgrown path. The building looked like a skeleton. Windows smashed, walls covered in graffiti. Everything smelled like mold and wet wood. And then my phone buzzed. No number, no caller ID this time. It was a text. Look under the stairs. I turned to the crumbling staircase leading down to what used to be a maintenance room. I don't know what I expected, but what I found stopped me cold. There was a metal lockbox, old, rusted, barely intact. Inside was a cassette tape and a note, folded so many times it felt like tissue. The handwriting was unmistakably Mark's. It read, "If you're reading this, I failed. I shouldn't have gone back. They're not dreams. Don't follow them." I drove home shaking. I still haven't told anyone. I don't even own a cassette player. But I ordered one. It should arrive tomorrow. I don't know what's on that tape. I don't know how any of this is even possible. But last night I had a dream. I was sitting in Mark's car. It was raining. He was driving. He looked at me, panicked, and said, "They made me remember." Then I woke up and my phone was on the floor with a new message from the same unknown source. Just 3 words. "It's not over." He gripped a counter with white knuckles and said, "Please, Dot, just try to remember what we talked about yesterday." But I swear I'd never seen the guy before in my life. I work at a small coffee shop tucked between a laundromat and a tax office. Nothing special. Just a place for regulars, weirdos, and the occasional tired college student. It's usually slow in the mornings, which I don't mind. I like the routine. Come in, prep the machines, turn on the warm yellow lights, flip the open sign, and let the day rinse and repeat. About a month ago, this guy started coming in. Middle-aged, looked like he hadn't slept in a year. Always wore the same fraying black hoodie and carried this weathered green notebook. The first time he walked in, he just stared at me for a second too long before ordering a drip coffee black, no cream, no sugar. I remember because he said, "Let's not mess with the formula this time," which I figured was just some quirky joke. But the next day he came in again. Same look, same hoodie, same dead eyes. He walked straight to the counter, looked me up and down, and asked, "Do you remember what I told you yesterday?" I blinked. Sorry, remind me." His face dropped. Not annoyed. "That's not possible," he whispered. "You said you would. You said it'd stick this time." I tried to laugh it off, thinking maybe he had me confused with another barista. Happens sometimes. Maybe you're thinking of someone else. But he didn't laugh. He just nodded slowly, like he'd seen this before, like he was expecting that answer. "It's happening again." He paid in crumpled bills, sat in the corner, and scribbled in his notebook the entire time. The next day, same thing. Only this time, he recited my full name before I gave it. Then my birthday. Then the name of my childhood dog, Max, who died when I was 9. I hadn't said any of those things aloud in years. I tried to play it cool. I said maybe he found me online. Maybe he was stalking me. He didn't deny it. He just looked miserable. "You said the same thing the last 7 times. At that point, I was unsettled, but I still thought this was some elaborate prank. Until the 5th visit. That morning, before I could open my mouth, he said, "The lights are gonna flicker. Then the song on the speaker's gonna skip. You're gonna say, 'Oh,' which of course, I didn't believe until it happened." Exactly as he said. I stared at the ceiling, stunned, as the soft indie playlist we always ran glitched into silence, then resumed a few beats behind. I looked at him and he just nodded. "You see now." I asked him what the hell was going on, and he said something that made my stomach turn. "We've had this conversation a lot, and I've tried everything. I've begged, I've screamed, I even stopped coming once. Didn't matter, the loop just reset. You forgot again." I looked around the shop, suddenly hyper-aware of everything. The smell of burnt espresso from an earlier customer. The hum of the fridge. The weird buzzing in my head like a pressure drop before a storm. "What do you mean, Loop?" He held up his notebook. It was filled with notes, detailed, handwritten pages. My words. His exact time. Even the stupid joke I always made about muffins on Wednesdays. "We sell M-stale, so they do want to get too confident." He flipped to the last page and slid it toward me and read, Day 48, no deviation. She still doesn't remember. Reality still resets at 8:47 a.m. I checked the wall clock. 8:41, he was trembling now. I thought maybe if I got you to remember something new, anything new, it would change. Break it. But you always forget. I'm not. This doesn't make sense, I said, heart pounding. He stood up, knocking over his chair. You said that last time too. And then the lights went out. The second he said it, click. The entire shop went black. The hum stopped, the music cut. Everything went dead, quiet. Then, like nothing happened, the lights came back. Music resumed. A car honked outside. Customers kept chatting like nothing was wrong. The clock said 8:47. I looked up, he was gone. I swear I didn't see him leave. No one saw him leave. His coffee sat full on the table, still steaming. I thought maybe I hallucinated the whole thing. Stress, sleep, deprivation. Same hoodie, same eyes. Only now, he looked different. Thinner, paler, like he hadn't eaten in weeks. He just said, please, just try. Please remember this time. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell him to leave me alone. But something inside me shifted. A flicker of something almost familiar, like a dream I'd had 100 times but never remembered when I woke up. I asked him, have you had this conversation already? And for the first time, his eyes lit up. You said it, he whispered. You finally said it. He reached into his coat and pulled out something I still don't understand, a slip of paper. Folded, aged, like it had been through years of wear. He handed it to me. It was in my handwriting. When you finally remember, don't trust him. He's not really stuck here with you. You're stuck here with him. Before I could ask what it meant, the lights flickered again. The song skipped. I looked at the clock, 8:47, and everything went dark. The third time I reached for the doorknob and felt like I'd already done it. I laughed it off. The 10th time I realized I hadn't stepped outside in Des Andes. I couldn't remember why. It was supposed to be a solo reset trip. No phone calls, no work, just me, a book I wouldn't finish, and an old Airbnb cabin buried somewhere in the Blue Ridge Mountains. The place had 5 stars, a rustic charm, and enough isolation to make me feel like the world had hit pause. I arrived on a Monday morning, at least I think it was Monday. I remember the gravel crunching under the tires, the quiet hum of cicadas, and the handwritten welcome note on the kitchen counter that said, enjoy your stay. You might not want to leave. At the time I thought it was cute. Clever. The first night I slept like a rock. No nightmares, no noise. Just deep, undisturbed blackness. But on the second day I started noticing small things. I'd go to the fridge to grab a bottle of water, and the door would already be cracked open. I'd hear soft floor creaks upstairs, even though I hadn't been up there since I arrived. Lights I didn't remember turning on were already glowing when I walked into rooms. But I brushed it off. Creaky old house, long drive, nerves. It was around the 4th day when I decided to leave early. I couldn't explain it. I just had this heaviness, a sense that something was off. The air inside felt thicker somehow. And the déjà vu started. At first it was small. I'd go to the bathroom, turn on the faucet, and feel this weird snap in my brain like, wait, didn't I already do this? But then it started happening every time I approached the front door. I'd grab my keys. I'd walk to the door. I'd reach for the knob and then stop. My heart would pound, my stomach would drop, and I'd feel this crushing sense of familiarity. Like not just I've done this before, but I've done this exact thing. At this exact time, feeling this exact fear. Then, every time, I'd shake it off and tell myself I was being dramatic. But somehow, I'd never actually leave. And the strangest part, I couldn't remember what stopped me. By what I thought was day 5, I started leaving myself notes. Little reminders. You are trying to leave. Don't listen to the voice. If you're reading this, it's already happening again. But every morning I woke up, the notes were gone. Or what one that originally read, get out now, had been scratched out and replaced with, stay, you're safe here. In my handwriting, I tried calling the owner. No service. Tried driving down the road, but I couldn't even make it to the car. The moment I stepped off the porch, the world would spin. My vision would blur, and I'd black out for what felt like seconds. Then I'd wake up in bed again. That's when I found the journal, hidden in a drawer under the living room coffee table. At first I thought it was part of the Airbnb's rustic charm, but it wasn't a guest book. It was a diary, and every entry was written in the same careful, looping script. Day 1, beautiful place, quiet, peaceful. Day 3, why does the door feel so heavy to open? Day 6, I think I've already read this entry. Day 9, I'm still here. Day 12, I'm not the first. There were dozens of pages, names, dates, scratched out messages. One entry was just the word run, written over and over again until the pen tore through the paper. I flipped to the back, and that's when I saw my name in my own handwriting. Day. It's not a dream anymore. I dropped the book and ran to the door. I didn't care about the spinning or the blackout. I had to leave. I grabbed the knob, twisted it, and felt nothing. No air, no sound. Just an overwhelming static behind my eyes. Then I blinked, and I was back in bed. Fresh clothes, coffee brewing in the kitchen. Welcome note back on the counter. No journal in sight. And yet, the same pressure in my head, the same tug of familiarity. Today, I tried to mark my arm with a pen just a little extra to prove I wasn't losing my mind. But it's gone now. Skin clear, like it never happened. I'm writing this down as fast as I can. I don't know how long I have before it resets again. I don't know what triggers it. Maybe it's time, maybe it's thought, maybe it's just me realizing the truth. But every time I get close to the truth, close to the door, it resets.